Very special group that we have visiting us today, and that is the first ever music group that came out of Calvary, the Melody Messengers. So if you're one of them, could you please stand up real fast? Awesome. We're glad you're with us today. And today, our speaker today is actually a Calvary alum himself. And he is the founder of Got Questions, Shay Hoodman.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Can I see with a quick show of hands how many of you were at the President's Dinner last night? So a good number of you all. So I'm going to do a shortened version of the presentation I did last night. But for those who enjoyed the funny questions, I actually swapped them out for a whole new set, so you'll get a fresh taste of funny questions. How many of you, even before last night, had heard of or had used gotquestions.org before? So vast majority of you. It's so cool to think that the website that we launched shortly after we graduated is now receiving millions upon millions of visitors month after month after month. It's been 20 years we've been doing this as our full-time ministry, and just to watch it grow and to take what we thought was a cool little hobby we're going to run and just exploding it into one of the most frequently visited Christian websites in the world. And I keep hearing people tell me, I've been using your site for forever. I had no idea you were a Calvary graduate or at all affiliated with Calvary. So that's encouraging as well. So gotquestions.org, it's a simple concept. We launched the website. We wanted people to be able to come and ask any question they had about the Bible, anything that's spiritually related, anything from really important questions to the mundane, the silly, the hobby horse questions. Someone is so focused on the end times, that's all they can ever think about, or someone who just wants to argue. We're questions we love, questions we tolerate, all of them we view as important because we want to reach people with the gospel. We want to get the most important questions answered. So to give you a quick background, the internet, back when I was at Calvary, so I'm a 98 graduate of the college, a 2001 graduate of the seminary, the internet was a baby. I mean, it was painfully slow, especially here in the dorms at Calvary. I mean, brutally slow. But right now, there are over 5.1 billion people in the world with access to the internet. You can reach more people online than through any other medium in the world. About 65% of the world's population has access to the internet. And searching for information, like truly, I have a question, I'm going to go to the internet to look for an answer, continues to be one of the most popular uses. Since we launched the website in February of 2002, which I imagine is older than some of you sitting here in the room, which really gets me right here. We've sent email answers to over 740,000 questions. So there are people who have come to the website, submitted a question, and received a personal response. And that's just in English. In 18 other languages, we've answered nearly 206,000 additional questions. So the website launched very simple. Originally, it was just a place where someone can ask a question. That was it. We started seeing the same questions coming in over and over again. We're like, maybe we should start actually putting some of the answers actually on the website. And that's when it really started to take off and grow. So if someone had the question, does God exist, which we're still asked day after day after day, they can come to the website, they can go directly to the article, they can just Google, does God exist, and find an article that way. They can come to the website, go to the questions about God category, or the questions about worldview or apologetics, and find this article. Or they can just do a search on the site, find it that way. They can use our apps for Android or iPhone, find it that way. They can go to YouTube, find our video on Does God Exist? So anywhere people are searching for truth online, we want to be there with an answer. Our website divided into 30 different categories representing over 9,000 frequently asked questions articles. And for what I've heard from several of you, especially after last night, that evidently our articles are very helpful in writing some of your papers for here at Calvary. And I heard at one point that a line copying from gotquestions.org, yes, it is still considered plagiarism at Calvary, even though the author is a Calvary grad. So the first time I spoke at chapel, think this was about 4 or 5 years ago, someone took a picture and tweeted, "I got to meet the co-author of half of Calvary's research papers today." I thought that was pretty funny. So yes, divide it into categories to help people to easily find the answers to the questions they're looking for. Well, the top questions, just think of anything that's controversial, anything that's a hot topic in culture, anything that Christians like to argue about, or something that's very just difficult. A question like, what does the Bible say about suicide? That's not one. Do you want, oh, I'll get back to you in a week or so. Like, no, that deserves a more rapid response. Tough questions. These are the ones that can be either emotionally tear-jerking or can be frightening. It can be super important. It breaks my heart every time we get I lost a child. I had a miscarriage, those type of questions. Or people in other parts of the world where truly if they convert to Christianity, they will either have to flee their country or they will be killed. Imagine living in that reality. Or even why does God allow evil? This can be a very personal question. Someone experienced a tragedy in their own life, or it can be a philosophical or theological question, all of which are difficult to answer. And then the favorite part of the presentation, so funny questions. How many of you have ever been sending a text or a message on your cell phone, and your phone autocorrects a misspelling that you did, but autocorrects it into something way worse than it would have just left it alone? Well, that's happened to me many times. Thankfully, I've learned to read my messages before I hit send. Well, so many people now use gotquestions.org on their mobile devices. Approximately 75% of our traffic is actually on smartphones now. So we get a lot of misspellings, autocorrect fails. So most of these are from this. So question number 1, my wife is pregnant. Is it wrong that she wants a boy, but I really want a grill? Yes. What is the great cloud of fitness? Well, I think cloud of witnesses is what they're going for. Cloud of fitness is that after you walk into a room where they just had a Zumba class, it's kind of, cloud. Is it wrong to smoke marred iguana? In Colorado, we've been experiencing marred iguana for a good 10, 15 years now, and here in Missouri just now didn't learn from our mistakes and is now experiencing the same thing. Next, why should I study the book of Acts? Is grumbling a sin? Now, were they going for gambling or are they going for grumbling? That's my question. Is adulting grounds for divorce? I know adulting can be a struggle for all of us sometimes, but I don't think it's a grounds for divorce. I think adultery is the word you're looking for there. What is the role of women in the church? I prefer cinnamon personally, but to each their own. Why do some Christians seek after the annoying? I think anointing would be the word they're going for, but trust me, I know some Christians who definitely tend to seek after the annoying. And then the funniest question of all time, I always leave this one the same. Is it wrong to take homeless people bowling and then gamble on which one of them will win? And just to give you a little more background, this is a summary of the question. Essentially, I think it was either youth group kids or even college kids, who they would go pick up homeless people, they would take them to a bowling alley, they would buy them a meal, they'd pay for them to bowl, but then not knowing which of them is the better bowler, would just gamble randomly on which one's going to win. I see some of you thinking that this is actually a fun idea, but let me tell you, no. This needs to be in the Calvary handbook, not allowed to do. But take the top questions, the tough questions, the funny questions, and God is doing some amazing things. In the first 8 months of this year, gotquestions.org has received over 71 million users from around the world. And as far as we know, that makes Got Questions the third most frequently visited Christian website in the world. And that's pretty cool from where we started, thinking this was going to be a hobby. 133 million sessions. That's how many different times the website's been accessed. 168 million page views. Over 26,000 people have received personal responses from the ministry. We have over 182,000 people who are subscribed to our email list and get our question of the week, and we have over 200 volunteers who serve with the ministry. Especially when we first launched, a lot of those were Calvary graduates, and still, I think I counted about 30 Calvary grads among the 200. Those are still serving with us in some ways. We have a program, or had a program, which may get started up again, where counseling students at Calvary can serve. It got questions as part of their Christian ministry, and we assign them the tough counseling questions we receive. Open your eyes to some of the things you will experience out there. But the most exciting statistic we share is we have approximately 50 different pages that are just dedicated to presenting the gospel. So a different way of asking the question, whether it's, how can I know for sure I go to heaven when I die? What does it mean to accept Christ as my personal Savior? Is there life after death? So far this year, those articles have been viewed over 2.6 million times. So people are reading the gospel and got questions. And from that, nearly 80,000 people have made professions of faith in Christ. That's just in 8 months of this year. How many of those are genuine first-time decisions, or we don't know if they're reconfirmations? We don't know. This is just what people are telling us. And of the 2.6 million, how many of those they had a seed planted, or they started to understand the gospel, and then later someone at a church or another ministry was able to harvest that? But God is doing some amazing things evangelistically through Got Questions as well. 85% of our visitors come from people just finding us on Google. They go to Google, they search for something related to the Bible, related to anything spiritual, and they find us that way. And hundreds of millions of people are searching for spiritual truth online. So you think of the internet, it can be a very dark place. There's a lot of garbage, a lot of trash, a lot of things to avoid on the internet, but God is using the internet as well. So if someone were to search for the question, how can I be saved? You go to search Google right now, gotquestions.org is in the #1 spot. They land on that page where we clearly present the gospel, where we link them to a video version of it, a version they can print out, give to someone else, an audio they can listen to, a version for kids, a version for teens, all those things. It's everywhere that people are searching, we want to be there with the truth. We're now translated into over 200 languages. As far as we can tell, every major world language where there is significant internet usage, gotquestions.org has our content translated into those languages. And 48% of our traffic comes from outside the US, and that number continues to grow and grow. We have question and answer teams for 12 different languages, representing approximately 85% of the world population can speak one of those 13 languages. It's going global, so to give you an idea of where some of our big traffic areas come from. Some closed countries, a lot of Muslim countries where the internet is by far the safest place for people to search for answers outside of Islam. And on the right side, you'll see some countries that maybe you wouldn't expect a whole lot of traffic from. I mean, I didn't even know there were 61 people in Antarctica. Evidently there are, and if I was in Antarctica, I would probably want to be indoors on the internet as well. North Korea, it is a closed country. They try to block everything, but evidently 15 people found a way to access the internet. And Christmas Island sounds like a wonderful place to visit. I think that's in the Pacific somewhere. And then local, to give you an idea, so you can see the global spoke. People all around the world are accessing the website, but also just in Missouri and Kansas, you can see many, many people searching for truth online and landing on gotquestions.org. So YouTube, from what I've heard, searching for video is becoming increasingly popular. More people are going to YouTube than any other place online to search for truth other than Google itself. So we've got over 1,000 video-based answers to questions. It's been viewed over 5 million times so far in 2023. And then 275,000 hours of videos have been watched just on our YouTube channel. That is a crazy amount of time. We have our videos translated into 10 different languages, and this is a new and rapidly growing aspect of the ministry as well. So here's part of my testimony, part of my story last night was my time at Calvary. Well, do I have anyone in here who is a biblical studies biblical studies major currently? Got a couple? Well, that was my major, which I always describe it to people. That's the major you take if you know you want to serve God, you know you want to teach the Bible, but you really don't know how or in what format. It's kind of the general degree that gives you a really good background in the Bible and theology, but doesn't train you for a specific way of doing that. And then when I went to Calvary Seminary, I got a master's degree in Christian theology, which is similar. You take every Bible and theology class the seminary offers, prepares you to teach it. Now looking back, it was the absolute perfect training for what I needed. I needed a solid background in the Bible and theology to be able to run Got Questions. But as I was going through it, Calvary was, I wouldn't call it a frustrating time, but a very uncertain time. It's like I knew I wanted to serve God with my life. I knew I wanted to be used of God, but I really had no idea how God was going to do it. Public speaking really is not my thing. I love to write, I love to research, I love to read. Public speaking is something I've had to learn to do and get to a point where I don't hate it anymore, I'll tell you that. Much more comfortable behind a computer screen where I can formulate my thoughts. I can spend time writing, that sort of thing. So Calvary did not have a degree in internet missions when I was there. I don't think it does now, but maybe at some point they will, because the internet will continue to have a greater and greater impact on how the church does missions. So I think I purposely wanted to leave some time for Q&A, but as like a closing, not closing, as a opening the next part of the talk. If you're going through Calvary right now and you don't know exactly how God's going to use you, what you're going to do next, my admonition to you is don't worry about it. If you dedicate yourself to the Lord, just get out there, whether it's a job in the secular industry, do that in such a way that you stand out, that people say, there's something different about you and I want to know what it is. Serve in your local church. Be a part of the solution in your church rather than a part of the problem that many churches experience with people always wanting to argue, always wanting to cause conflict and division. Be the opposite of that. Look for ways to whether you're serving in a local church ministry, whether you're serving in a business, whether you're a missionary, so look for ways to be an impact, be willing to be used of God and however he might want to call you, and then sit back and watch God do amazing things. That's what gotquestions.org was. It truly was. Melissa and I thinking, we need something to do until God calls us to a real ministry. And it turned out gotquestions.org was the real ministry he was calling us to. And so here we are 20 years later, which I know is older than some of you in the room. Just continue to be blown away every day that we get to do this. That if I were to write my dream ministry job description, it would be doing exactly what we're doing. And beyond that, then to see the impact that God is doing through it, it is so cool. I love what I do. I love the impact it's having. And I love coming back here to Calvary and seeing your faces and remembering myself in your same shoes. And I see some faces in the audience, people that we went to school with, their kids are now at Calvary. And that also makes me feel really old, but that's okay. So any questions? Anything you would like to know? Do we just go with hands, or are we going through the Twitter or?
Ready? 2K, we can start with you, but we can also, if you guys have any questions, you can text them to me, or if you get them through Twitter, we can try to get those to him as well.
So last night at the President's Dinner, you talked about how there are volunteers who are a part of the ministry.
Yes.
How does that look like, writing an article and also the process of editing and also publishing an article?
Yeah. So when we started, it was probably about a month after we launched the website that the volume of questions started to get to a point where it's like, we can't do this on our own. Like literally, Melissa and I would work all day long, come home, and our entire evening would be spent answering all these questions. So we started emailing friends, people we knew from Calvary, hey, here's what we're doing. Would you be interested in helping? So we had to develop some sort of application process. So like, for example, if you wanted to serve, there's a place on the website you can apply to be a writer, we'll ask you to share your testimony with us, share whether you agree with our statement of faith, which is, if you agree with Calvary's statement of faith, our statement of faith would be very, very similar. And then we'll have you answer a test question because we want to gauge both, are you a decent writer, but also can you answer a question biblically with the appropriate amount of compassion. We get writers who are straight to the point, but it comes across like very cold. So we want both a good writer, someone who knows the Bible and knows theology well, but they can also write in a way that will attract people, will not turn people off, will not sound aggressive or rude or anything like that. So those are the things we look at. And when they're approved, we then, the first several answers they come in, we review very, very closely. And then over time, we've had writers who've been serving us for nearly 20 years now. If every answer they sent out has been perfect, like Professor Williamson's answers, I'm sure if I could ever draft him to be a writer, they would be trustworthy. They can earn a certain level of trust. And if we're super busy, then we can approve them automatically. But our goal is that any answer that goes out in the name of the ministry, we want someone to have reviewed that to make sure it's good. Yeah.
Awesome. And kind of along those lines, as we have students here at Calvary who are looking towards graduating in May, would there potentially be any job opportunities open for them with Got Questions?
Yes. Got Questions is a unique role in that like no one person can just come in, I only want to write, or I only want to do web development, I only want to design apps, I only want to do videos. Everyone needs to be able to multitask, to do various things. But while we don't always have open positions, we are always open to hearing from someone, finding out what your skills, spiritual gifts are, and seeing if you would be a good fit. So I would encourage any of you, graduate something, working at Got Questions sounds like a great opportunity you'd enjoy. There's a contact us form on our website. Just send us an email, mention that you're from Calvary, and it will get to me. So yes, please do.
Cool. And then I have kind of just a question for you personally. How has running Got Questions, such a large Christian organization, how has that grown your faith personally?
How much time do you have?
11:50.
Yes, exactly. So many different ways that running Got Questions has grown me, has matured me. I remember when I first left Calvary, I'm in no sense am I blaming the school or professors for this, but I came away with the attitude that the way Calvary teaches and believes, that's the only possible way to understand the Bible, and everyone else is just stupid. That's kind of what my mindset was. And while my views have not changed, I don't know of any significant thing that I was taught at Calvary that I no longer hold at all, but they have softened. I've been educated by other believers. Like there are other ways of looking at some of these issues, some of these passages that, yes, I can disagree with you and still consider you my brother and sister in Christ without feeling the need to divide over things. So while my views haven't changed, I recognize that the tent of evangelical Christianity is much broader than I thought it was when I was a student here, and that's a good and that's a healthy thing to do. So that's one major area where I've grown, and just I look at some of the answers that we wrote like shortly after we launched the website and the way we do things now, just the way of communicating, like speaking the truth in love from Ephesians 4:15, grace seasoned with salt, being ready to answer any question, but doing with gentleness and respect. So the truth and love aspect is learning how to do that, how to express an answer that's truthful, that points to Scripture, that uses Scripture as the foundation, but also doing that in a loving, in a winsome way. That's a skill that grows and develops over time. I definitely did not have it after I graduated from Calvary. I think I had the truth thing down. I'm still in the process of learning how to communicate that truth in love. Yeah.
Awesome. And kind of along with that, what's the most challenging aspect of doing that and answering very real questions through email or web page?
Yeah. So when someone comes to you in person and asks you a question, they can hear tone of voice. They can see your facial expression. They can see body language. They can tell you're not angry at them. when all they get is text, like either on their own phone or in an email, it can come across cold when that's not your intent. That is always a struggle, and that, again, back to the speaking the truth in love, it's hard to detect love sometimes, especially when this is a confrontational issue. This is something that they are possibly going to disagree with you about, and to not think you're being aggressive or abrasive with them. That's a really difficult part of the ministry. But then also, it's knowing like what's next. Like if we're a technology-based ministry, so anywhere that technology goes, any place where people are going to start searching for truth online, we want to be there. So right now, artificial intelligence is huge. ChatGPT, Google Bard, all the different AI programs out there. Is there a way to use a program like that? So if people are going to be using AI, which we don't recommend just because of all the dangers, all the risks, but if people are going to do it anyways, there's a way that we can use that for the gospel. And we're tentatively experimenting with creating a version of like a ChatGPT that only uses content from reliable Christian sources as its background. So any question you were to ask it, the content would come from reliable Christian sources. But other people would question, no, you shouldn't be doing AI at all. So it's kind of like finding the right balance between, yes, this new technology, we want to see if there's a way to use it, but also not getting ahead and doing something before its time. So it takes a lot of discernment and wisdom to run a ministry like Got Questions, where we try to be on the forefront of technology.
Makes sense. Has there ever been a question
Yes.
that you've chosen to not answer because you believe the question is unanswerable?
So the most difficult or most unanswerable question is always, why does God allow, or why did God allow, and then insert whatever tragedy just happened to that person. Ultimately, you can't answer that question. You can't say, God allowed this terrible thing to happen to you so that this. You can provide comfort. You can point them to what Scripture says about God is always present with you in times of trouble. God works all things together for good. There's so many things you can point them to, but you can't answer that question. And whenever I hear people trying to answer that, for example, back when the island of Haiti was experienced a huge earthquake, buildings, thousands of people were killed. People were saying, well, God did that because of all the witchcraft that takes place on the island of Haiti. It's like, really? You know that that's the answer to that question? How do you know that? And the same thing personally. Some people will say, Job's comforters, well, you're suffering because you did something terrible. You committed a heinous sin, and that's why God is punishing you like this. And that's not at all what happened. So trying to answer that question, the why did God allow, is always one. We'll answer it in the sense that we will try to provide comfort and care and compassion. But in terms of actually trying to explain why that happened, we'll say we can't answer that question.
Yeah. So every question gets a response, but not always a answer. Is that correct?
If someone makes it 100% obvious that they're just trolling us, that they are just trying to argue, debate, if there's a lot of foul language in the question, usually we will just delete it rather than the verse that says, don't cast your pearls before swine. Sometimes, not all the time, we'd much rather be answering questions for people who are actually interested in our responses rather than trying to argue with someone whose mind is already made up. But we will engage in respectful debate as long as we think there's a chance the person is actually interested in what we're going to say, that there could possibly be a edifying outcome to the conversation.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And we occasionally get people who misunderstand our purpose and ask us their math homework questions. Or quick funny story, someone asked, what do you think of this Easton softball bat that we want to buy for our church league softball team? I was like, why in the world are you asking us what we think about the softball bat? But that was actually literally the softball bat I had just purchased for my church league softball team, and it was a great bat. So I was able to answer that question, hey, it's a great bat, but actually, here's what the ministry is all about. So, and that person came back and then asked a real question. So sometimes you try to be strategic and see, this isn't the quite a type of question we answer, but let's give it a shot and see what happens.
That's cool. That's awesome. Is there any connection to churches for follow-up from salvation experiences recorded on the website? If so, how do you select churches?
Yes. So the biggest weakness of internet-based ministry is follow-up. Because ultimately you can't contact people beyond their willingness. If they don't give you any contact information, really there's no way to get a hold of them. So if someone makes a profession of faith, they land on a page where we ask, can you give us your address so we can send you some discipleship material? Can we have your email address so we can at least stay in contact with you? We open up a window where they can chat with our partners at needhim.org, where it's an online chat feature where they try to confirm the salvation decision, make sure they understood the gospel. And then ultimately, Got Questions is designed for follow-up. When I came to faith in Christ as a teenager, I had a ton of questions. I wish Got Questions existed then. So we're designed for that. But one of the biggest things we do is we have a church finder where we'll point to the church finder for the Southern Baptist Church, for the Christian Missionary Alliance Church, for Calvary Chapel churches. Generally solid Bible teaching churches that we can recommend where people just type in their zip code or their address and they can find a church in their area. But we're limited in even, like, I come from a Bible church background, and every Bible church I've been to, almost every Bible church I've been to would be one I would recommend to someone to go to, but I can't guarantee that's going to be a case all around the country. So we don't want to give an endorsement as much as we want to say, you need to find a solid Bible teaching church in your area where you can begin fellowshipping, worshiping, serving, being encouraged and built up. So yes, we do everything that we can, but again, internet-based ministry follow-up is always going to be the weakness.
Understand. Okay, so I have a question here from someone in the audience. How do you handle questions of those who are in danger for their faith? How do you counsel those people?
It's the first time we received a question that made me really suspicious was someone from in a Muslim country, and they're asking where they could find where a group of Christians meet. The first warning sign is like, oh, that's great. I can help a new believer find a church. I was like, or is this person actually looking for where believers are meeting in secret so he can then go report them to authorities, kill them, who knows? So we have our translators for Arabic, for Urdu in Pakistan, every Muslim country, where we'll give them our translators' personal email address, no other identifying information, where they can then contact them, and they can be far more discerning than we can in terms of, is this person legitimate? Do we want to invite them to our church or point them to one, or is this person just looking to cause trouble? So that is was a reality check for us the first time that happened.
For sure. We have a few more minutes. Do we have any questions from the audience?
So I had a question kind of about your philosophy with how to answer questions, because you deal with a lot of questions. I'm a Bible and theology professor here, and obviously I tell my students everything in Bible and theology is debatable. What is your philosophy on asking questions where someone's coming asking about Calvinism, Arminianism, even dispensationalism, covenant theology? How do you guys handle that, and how would you kind of tell the students how you handle it, maybe how we can engage in those types of questions that we get?
Yeah. So if I were to come to you and say, hey, I'm confused about Calvinism versus Arminianism, what do you believe about it? I'm asking you as a friend, what do you believe? I'm not asking you, can you just give me the 5 points of Calvinism, the 5 points of Arminianism, and then just leave me confused trying to figure it out for myself? So depending on how they ask the question, we view it as people are asking us for here's what we think is the correct answer to this question. If they ask, what are the differences? What are the 10 different views on this issue? We will give them that and then express, but here's the view that we think is correct and why. So it depends, one, how they ask the question, but then secondarily, even when we take a strong stance, we really think this is the answer, and we think it's important that you understand that this is the answer. We try to do that in a spirit of love, not saying you have to believe this or you're not a believer, or you have to believe this or you're in rebellion against God. A lot of the issues are spiritual growth issues that it's really hard for younger believers to understand, and then as they grow in their faith, they get a better grasp on things. So one, depends on how they ask the question, but no matter what, share the answer with grace and love. Even when you take a strong stance, you can still do that. But it is a challenge, especially when it's an issue where I know a lot of people who've gone down that road, and I know what it results in. I want to save the person, but I don't want to do so at a point of seeming divisive or seeming like a my way or the highway type of attitude. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Oh, yes. So, good. Thank you for the reminder. So as I was preparing this, I was looking through some of my old files on my computer, and I found a document titled the Calvary Top 10. And at first I was like, what in the world is that? So I discovered this is something I wrote shortly after I graduated from Calvary. And I was reading it, and I thought it was pretty funny. So top 10 things I learned at Calvary that I shouldn't have. It takes 37 seconds for a mouse to explode in a microwave. Hold on, I had nothing to do with that. It takes 18 months to get a microwave back into the guy's dorm if you explode a mouse in the microwave. It is a lot easier to write a 10-page paper in Courier than Times New Roman. And for those of you who've seen the older campus, with a big slingshot, it is possible to hit the girls' dorm with a water balloon from the guys' dorm. Putting a 7-foot cutout of Shaquille O'Neal in the girls' bathroom is not a good idea. In the hands of the wrong person, the toilet flushes can be a dangerous weapon against those who are in the showers. This is no longer applicable in the days of cell phones, but having a watch set a few minutes slow is good for 2 to 3 excuses for why you were late for curfew. If you put blue fabric dye in a shower head, you can make a person look like a Smurf for 3 days. Yelling "woman on the floor" in the guy's dorm actually accomplishes the opposite of what you intend it to. And then, top 10 things we should have learned at Calvary but didn't. There actually is a useful purpose for taking a class called dispensational premillennialism. Having a roommate does in some ways prepare you for being married. Being a procrastinator is not a valuable skill. Attending approximately 700 chapel services in 4 years is a good thing. Don't make fun of old married students. You might be one someday. If you think college life is tough, wait until you get out into the real world. Eating ice cream at every meal is not a good habit to get into. The rules at Calvary aren't really that bad after all. The professors really do know what they're talking about. And number one, when you're in college, you know 1/2 of what you think you do, 1/4 of what you should, and you get a lot more than you want to. So I thought that was a fun reminder, a good refresher of what some of the things I experienced at Calvary, some of the things I learned. And again, just in closing, as much as I love being funny and making people laugh, don't take your time here at Calvary for granted. Allow it to shape you both biblically and theology, give you the head knowledge that you need, but also to transform your heart, to take that knowledge on the journey from your head to your heart. That's huge. And as much as I learned so much at Calvary that prepared me perfectly for what I do at Got Questions, the spiritual growth I experienced here at Calvary was more impactful on me than just the facts about the Bible and theology that I learned. So that would be my closing, hopefully motivating statement to you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Shay. Thank you for being with us today. And as we close out, we'll have Chris come and lead us in a song.